Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. I am your host, Jason Miles. If you are new to the show, you are new to the channel, please hit the like, hit the bell, so you're always notified whenever we go live, as we're constantly doing new shows all the time. Just this past Sunday, we were part of a cross stream with Sublation Media, who pretty much everybody in TIR will be writing for. I'm working on a piece right now for Sublation. Let's cross our fingers that it passes the editorial desk of Mean Jean Bajlan about what does justice look like, juxtaposing Rodney King and O.J. Simpson. I do have some good news for fans of the show and fans of my co-host. Pascal was a little sick for a while and had to go to the hospital. We tried to keep it as quiet as possible. He is home and he's feeling better. Not quite ready to come back to the show yet, but just wanted to give you guys an update. So if you have prayers, if you have positive thoughts, please send them out to our comrade, the Pascal Robert. Also, check it out. I was just on the David Feldman show this past Tuesday, kind of talking about that paper that I'm writing for Sublation. And this Thursday, I will be on our German comrade show, 99 zu 1. They want to talk to me about metal music and its role in being radical. I have a feeling they're not going to like what I have to say. That being said, let us bring in our special guest co-host. He was once our special guest, probably about a year or so ago. And when his name got thrown out by friend of show Teray Reed, my co-host got all fired up. He's like, "Oh, Andrew Hartman, that's the nigga that wrote the book about the culture war." It's a quote. It is a quote. Please welcome professor at Illinois State University and author of the definitive text on the right-wing culture war. He is Dr. Andrew Hartman.
Thanks, Jason. That was quite the introduction, and I gotta say, I like Pascal's sort of like introduction a lot. Yeah, I like that.
I remember that very clearly because I'm not going to sit here and lie. I was not familiar with your work, and so we didn't. No, you did. You mailed us the book. I think you mailed us the book after the show.
Yeah,
but
it was a year ago.
It was about a year ago. You were on, and Teray had mentioned your name a while, and we were trying to get the coordination and everything going, and it's just names, right? So I don't know, what anybody looks like, who anybody is, right? And I'm looking at names like, oh, Pascal, we got Andrew Hartman. He's like, oh yeah. We gotta get that motherfucker. Yeah, get that motherfucker. We gotta get it. So, and that's a fun show for both of us. It was definitely a learning experience for me to kind of do some research into your work. And a lot of the research I've been doing for other things that I've been writing and other video essays that I've done. The big reason why, for anyone watching this show, this is a huge show for me. These people that are on this show have been extremely influential in a lot of the video essays that you've seen. In pretty much everything that I've been reading, from Corey Pine to the Alpha Bunga Bunga Gang and the end of history. I believe it might even be quoted in Mark Watson's book, The Memeing of Mark Fisher. Everyone quotes Andrew Hartman.
It is true. Well, I wrote a history of the culture wars, and now everyone's talking about the damn culture wars. And as I always say, what's bad for the world or what's bad for the nation, it's been good for book sales.
But the real reason why Andrew Hartman is on here, the real reason.
I know where we're going.
Andrew Hartman's a Denver Bronco fan.
That's true.
And that's what really matters.
Well, I grew up in Denver. My dad had season tickets, so I saw John Elway play live like over 100 times.
Oh, tear to
But
my
I'm
eye.
sporting my Nuggets gear because back-to-back MVP Nikola Jokic, who should still be in the
Look, we draw the line. Look, I'm all Denver football season, right?
Yeah.
Great place during the football season. During basketball season, fuck that town. It's one of my worst shows were in Denver.
Okay. Sorry, man. But things are looking up for our Denver Broncos since the last time I was on the show.
The angel that is George Patton,
Yeah.
that has been bestowed upon the Bronco faithful, has made some of the best off-season moves I've seen as a football fan since I was 9. So I'm knocking on this plywood composite Amazon desk that I have, that everyone stays healthy, because if so, it is going to be an amazing football season. We have a sports show now, Andrew.
Okay. You need to bring me on that too.
Okay. As the young people say no more, fam. Well, let's bring in our esteemed guest. Jen Senko is a documentary filmmaker, author, and media activist based in New York City. She's known for her award-winning documentaries, Roadmap Warrior Women, The Vanishing City, and The Brainwashing of My Dad. The Brainwashing of My Dad received the prestigious People's Choice Award in Public Service and Activism for the Webby Awards. Senko's adaptation of her film into a book of the same name tracks the pernicious and addictive rise of right-wing media and how this media served as a tool for libertarian billionaires to get people to vote against their own interests and gain one-party rule. Jen's work focuses on socio-political themes with the intent of inspiring activism and fomenting change. Jen is dressed to kill. She is filmmaker extraordinaire, the Jen Senko.
Thanks for that intro.
Oh, people always get a good intro from me. Usually.
I'm excited to be here.
I'm very pleased to have you both. I was saying off air, and I will say it again on air. This to me is like a dream panel. I was on the David Feldman show. I was doing research one night for a video essay. I believe it's the video essay called "We Don't Need Another Hero." And in doing that research, I'm trying to find clips of Tucker Carlson.
Oh no!
Right. And I'm watching all this Tucker Carlson stuff to try to find the right racist thing to put in, right? And I came across the trailer to your movie, and I'm like, who is this woman? What is this? So I started trying to find more clips of your movie, and I'm watching it. I was like, oh, this is falling in line with all, because I don't sleep, and I got the whole pot of coffee going, and I'm reading JSTOR articles on deregulation, and I'm like, oh, damn it, I could have just watched this damn movie and not read all those goddamn articles on deregulation. Hartman's book's got all the highlights in it, right? And so I go on Feldman's show. I find out you went on Feldman's show, and I ask his producer. I say, hey, do you have Jen Senko's information, the woman that made the documentary about brainwashing of my father? And they're like, sure, because I think I hit you up on Twitter, and I didn't have enough followers for you to respond. Maybe, I don't know.
I did respond.
Not the first time.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, you didn't notice the first one. But
everybody follow Jason.
But so I reached out to, they sent me all your information. Here's your email, here's this. And I reached out and I was like, please, And then when you confirmed, and I'll say this on air, I effed up a few weeks ago, and I was supposed to have Hartman on because Teray and I have had this planned Hartman show for a while. And Pascal was involved with this planned Hartman show as well. And somewhere along the lines, one of us, probably me, effed up and like double booked. So I'm like, Teray, can you text Hartman so I don't like he doesn't get mad at me? He's like, you text him, send Andrew a message apologizing. And so I'm hoping, I'm like, if Andrew co-hosts with me, this will be like my dream show to really talk about this stuff. So Andrew said yes. Jen said yes. Here we are.
It's perfect because it gave me the opportunity today, in between grading papers, to watch the documentary, and I just thought it was wonderfully done. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, I'm sure. And wow, you interviewed some people for that thing.
I got very lucky. Yeah, I got very lucky.
I could not believe, like, there's Noam Chomsky.
I couldn't believe it either.
That
It's just like when you start doing a film and it's timely, it's sort of like magic happens, and just people just rolled in. It was, and somebody would say, "Oh, do you want to talk to Noam?" And I'm like, "Noam Chomsky?" Yeah. And then one thing just led to another, and then I got all these fantastic people. And Eric Bullard's in it, who recently passed, which is really horrible. But I got a lot of good people. I was so lucky.
Go ahead, Andrew. Looks like you have a question. Go for it.
No. Well, I don't want to, I don't know how we're going to play this out in terms of spoiler alerts for those This is Revolution viewers and listeners who haven't seen your documentary, but I was really touched by the conclusion because, it's a little bit awkward to make a movie about your dad being brainwashed by right-wing media, right? Was it a little awkward?
Yeah, I was really scared to do it. I probably would have started it years earlier, but I didn't. I had to build up the courage. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So just the conclusion made me so happy.
That's good. It made us happy too.
Yeah.
I used to not say how it ended because I thought, well, I want, people to, I don't want to, spoil the ending. But now, if I'm talking about it and wrapping it up in a nutshell, I think it's really important to say the ending and what happened to show how media matters. Media matters, yeah.
But your mom was she played quite the role in that.
Yeah. I'm actually at her place right now. She's 102 and still kicking.
Oh, that's amazing.
Does all the political emails. Today, Amnesty International called and said, "Hello, is Eileen there?"
Really?
Yeah. Well, she had just signed a petition or something. I guess she gave them her number.
So one of the questions that I have for you: when did you decide to grab the camera and turn it at what moment did you say, okay, my dad has turned into a curmudgeonly Archie Bunker character? When did you decide
well, I wish it was just
because this isn't camera phones you pulled out. You pulled out the real deal. Pop, I'm getting the Super 8 on your behind.
A what?
The Super 8. I'm getting the big camera.
Oh yeah. I mean, I had all kinds of cameras. I had my camera, which is a good 3-chip camera. It was great. And then I had another DP who was really good. Actually, she used that camera too. We had a couple of those same cameras. Anyway, I loved that camera. But I wish my dad had just turned into a curmudgeony Archie Bunker. He turned into more like Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, because
Oh,
Archie Bunker, despite everything, Archie Bunker was always still lovable in the family, and it seemed like,
yeah. And he didn't really like yell or foam at the mouth or have steam come out his ears or threaten to disown his kids or, you know, he was still, he didn't really raise his voice. He
And
was
and one
scary.
and one thing we talk about on this show, and you definitely talk about it in your documentary, is that as jobs are moving out into the suburbs, as people are moving out into the suburbs, as commutes are getting longer, and especially with the end of the fairness doctrine, what we're seeing is a rise of talk radio. And a big reason for the rise of talk radio is it's just easier to sell ad time, right? And so you say that your dad is driving to work, and as he's driving to work, he's listening to maybe I don't think he was the first large syndicated talk show personality, but probably the most influential,
Mm.
Rush Limbaugh, and definitely fell in love with Rush Limbaugh.
Well, first he was listening to Bob Grant, and what they call the father of conservative radio. Um, and Rush Limbaugh hadn't gone national yet. Um, and then my dad hadn't fully retired. He was part-time retired and had a long solo commute.
Mhm.
And that's where he found talk radio and Bob Grant. It wasn't until he fully retired and went home that he found and fell in man love with Rush Limbaugh.
And I want to ask this question to the panel. I don't know if you guys feel the same way too. Um, that first advent of talk radio, um, for me, this is before there's 24-hour sports radio. So I'm a baseball fan, or was a really hardcore baseball fan as like a 9, 10 year old. And in the Bay Area, after the Giants, San Francisco Giants played, they would play syndicated talk radio. So a lot of times I would get right wing voices post game. And so I would go to sleep listening to Rush Limbaugh. Um, and so it felt like news. It was just like listening to the news because I'd wake up in the morning with the radio still playing and it would be like the news show. So do you think that was a way, and I asked this to you and Andrew, if that's kind of how people get slowly hypnotized by, because like, well, I'm just listening to the news.
Yeah, yeah. I think what it is like with my dad, he didn't want to really listen to music. He always wanted to educate himself. He was really big on education. So he figured talk radio, he'd learn something. It was a little newsy, and he thought he was bettering himself. So yeah, and 97% of talk radio is right wing across the country.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how come we have all these right wing nuts.
but I think there's something to be said for as and their studies have shown as people get older, they're less attracted to listening to music in the car and more attracted to tapping into some sort of dialogue. I think that helps explain like the recent popularity of podcasts, and I certainly think that helps explain the popularity of someone like Rush Limbaugh. But I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh a lot when I was doing research for my book on the culture wars. I also listened a lot to Sean Hannity and Mark Levin and a few others.
Oh.
And here's the thing, Rush Limbaugh, especially in comparison to all the others, was extremely talented and very funny.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just like really something to be said for the talent of Rush Limbaugh and being able to attract the type of audience and build the type of influence that he had. Yeah, I mean, he was a horrible, despicable right winger, and hopefully he's rotting in hell, but he was extremely good at what he did.
Yeah, he was. And what you said earlier about how as people get older, wanting to listen to a voice or talking. Maybe that's even connected to not having that community at work if they're retired.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? So I lived with a family that wasn't my own for some time, and the dad loved watching these news programs, and the family was they were a white family, and or they're still alive, very much alive. Uh, and they watched a fair share of Fox News, but they also watched a fair share of Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart, which I thought was kind of funny because it would be a nice little balance of the two.
Now that's balance.
And the dad used to love watching Dan Rather. And wherever Dan Rather would go news-wise, because after he got kicked off network, then he was on some cable show for a while. I can't remember which one. And he loved watching kind of news exposés because that actually is where a lot of real journalism comes from, because it's not the gossipy news of the now that everybody's so tied into what just happened, who said what via this social media app, and that kind of those bigger exposés where they take a lot of time and have to fly someone out somewhere. He loved those stories. He'd call me in the room. He's like, Jason, okay, no one's here yet. Let's hang out and watch the news. And when you think about long form talk radio, 3-hour shows, it just feels like an indoctrination into an ideology, because it baits you with the idea that I'm listening to this on a news channel.
Yeah.
And this is just factual because they can't lie. Why would they? They're the news people. These aren't personalities.
Right.
And here we are some 40 years later almost. And that still seems to be in the back of people's minds as they listen to this kind of stuff. How do you feel about that, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, so when you listen to somebody like Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, the list goes on, they treat their audience like they're part of an insider club, and you feel like you have some sort of special knowledge, special wisdom that the rest of the world is missing. And so, like some of the metaphors and analogies, Jen, that you used in the movie, from brainwashing to cult-like, there's something to that. And it's a powerful potion. It really is.
It is. I mean, and it's repetition. Repetition is a big part of brainwashing. And there's emotion and anger. And that's emotion and anger. That's that really plays into brainwashing as well. It changes the brain chemistry. They can activate the amygdala, where the cerebral cortex, where you do your rational thinking, is shut off, and then you're, in a fight or flight uh, state of mind, state of being.
Yeah, there was something from your documentary about Fox News and about how they really sort of play up this 24/7 crisis mode that we're always in, and they have the tracker and they speak loudly. I feel like Fox News has won in the sense that now this mode of news has been replicated. I feel like MSNBC and to some degree CNN do the same thing. The message is different, but the medium has now become a sort of like panic-stricken. I mean, the whole year in which MSNBC sort of focused on Trump and Russiagate, I felt like this was the flip side of Fox News, and it's really sort of like beating home the drums of panic, of fear. And I feel like all of that cable news now is a sort of like a form of elder abuse, because so much of the audience are the elderly, and it's whipping people up into a paranoid frenzy.
But don't you think, like with Fox, not news, I call it, they've been whipping people up into a frenzy over stuff that was made up, or that was exaggerated, or that was, skewed. Um, Whereas I think by the time MSNBC and CNN started, there's cause for panic in my mind. Not
Yeah,
panic,
I guess
really.
so.
Panic,
So I
yeah,
would never in a million years say MSNBC and CNN are as bad as Fox News. Like, I'm not going there. But
yeah,
the exaggerations got really out of hand during the Trump administration, and there was this sort of like um, Trump derangement syndrome, I think, that really sort of fed into the ratings. And the very reason that I think one of the very reasons why Trump was able to sort of ascend as a politician was because he drove ratings for all of the media, all of the news networks, all of the media networks. And I just feel like the ultimate sort of the ultimate representation or signal that Fox News won is that now that mode of quote unquote news presentation it defines all of our cable news media landscape. I find
yeah,
it extremely troubling.
yeah. I do think though Fox puts it best. Like
Oh
they,
yeah,
there's no Janine Giroux, that I can think of on MSNBC. There's no Sean Hannity. There's no Tucker Carlson. They're like, I see what you're saying. But to me, they're like watered down versions. Fox, like Roger Ailes being behind Fox, he was a genius. He understood television, and he knew what drew people in, and what got people addicted. And you're so right about like CNN and Trump. Like how many free hours he got billions of dollars of free advertising from CNN. And remember what Les Moonves said? That he may not be good for the country, but he was damn good for the money. Yeah,
precisely because of the sort of like way in which you in the documentary outline um, what draws people to Fox News. I felt like Trump did that for CNN and did that for MSNBC and still does, quite frankly.
yeah, yeah. I'm guilty of watching a little MSNBC, but I'm living with my mom, so I have to watch television with her. And yeah, but yeah, you can only take so much of it.
um, so maybe you could talk a bit more about sort of the making of the film. Um, when you had conversations with your family about the fact that you were making a film about your father, how did those go? I mean, it's the people who are listening or watching right now should be sort of cognizant of the fact that most of the film is spent documenting the rise of right-wing media and what that does to people. But the backdrop always is the fact that your father was a victim of this vast right-wing conspiracy, as Hillary Clinton aptly described it. So like, how did your family deal with the fact that you were making a film that was quite personal?
Well, it's funny. I remember the first time I filmed them. It was on the front porch, and they were just sitting there talking, and I just lifted my camera and started filming them, and they didn't flinch. They just, I think they were used to seeing me with a camera. I don't know, they didn't think anything of it. I'll tell you when it was really scary. When I decided, okay, this is going to work. I'm going to start shooting my dad, and I'm going to ask him about being a Republican. And now I was on the back porch, And I was so scared. That's why in the beginning of the film, you only see the middle of my dad, because I was so scared he was going to blow up. But I kept my cool. I had no tone judgment in my voice. And then as he started talking and as he started heating up, I just lifted the camera. And then I think he actually enjoyed having that audience and being able to spout without my mother or I saying, "Well, we don't agree with that," you know. So, and they kind of got used to it. Um, and I told my mom I'm making a film about dad, so she was especially compliant, and she was in on it. You know, she would even come up with ideas. You know, like, look, I could show how I'm ripping up daddy's mail that he's getting. You know, asking for money from the Heritage Foundation or from the NRA or Judicial Watch. Um, so after after that time, it was okay. A couple times my dad would get cranky and then, you know, ask me what are you doing? But he didn't ask me that until like later on. And then I said I'm making a film about you. And he said, "Oh." And I think he thought that was okay because he thought it was really interesting. So,
So it was during the time in which you were making the film in which your mom conspired to deprogram him, and
yes,
it worked. Yeah.
yes. During that whole time, it was so interesting, and you know, I'm just so glad that I documented it.
So when you set out to make the movie, you had no idea that it was going to have, in a way, a sort of, at least at a personal level, a happy ending.
Yeah, no, no. I remember the day my mom called me on the phone. You know, I had already started the movie, and she said, "Guess what?" I said, "What?" She said, "Oh, this was after the TV broke in the kitchen, and she got a new TV, and she programmed the remote so he couldn't watch Fox anymore. He just didn't bother, and so he was watching like regular news, like you know whatever she had on at lunchtime." And she said, "Guess what? Daddy said he liked Obama." I said, "No, you're kidding me, right? You're kidding me." And she said, "No, he said it. He said it." You know, and then a few weeks later on his birthday, he was born on Halloween. It was very fitting. Um, he said it again, and I got, you know,
Yeah,
you saw that. I got it on
I
camera.
did. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so when historians talk about the emergence of the right as a movement after World War II and especially after the 1960s, and when they discuss the reasons why so many working class people who had sort of previously voted Democratic shifted, especially during to vote for Reagan and after the 1980s, they list a whole host of reasons. I should say we list a whole host of reasons. Media is just one factor of many, but you seem to sort of isolate it as the most important factor.
Yeah, I did because I think we're extremely influenced by media. We rely on media and especially news to give us information about the world we live in, even about who we are. And I think that, and then there are, you know, neuroscientists like Dr. Kathleen Taylor who agree that we're much more malleable than we would like to believe. I mean, we don't want to believe, like you guys are not so much, you're anomalies because you would listen to Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and all that, and you didn't get brainwashed. You were listening to it objectively. You didn't just happen to fall into it and go, "Oh, here's news." And that's great. That's really impressive. That's really remarkable. I'm not saying everybody is so easily influenced, but people can be very easily influenced, especially you put somebody in a suit and tie, sit them behind a reporter's desk and call it news, and they see it in the doctor's office, they see it in the restaurant, they see it at a truck stop, they're going to believe, oh, this is news, this is okay. And they can very easily get hooked. I mean, you know about the 2008 Emory University study, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
where like,
Well, why don't you explain it? Yeah.
what?
Go ahead and explain it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, in that study, they found it caused a rightward shift and an increase in voting Republican. Watching 3 minutes of Fox in 2008 made a typical Democrat 1 percentage point likelier to vote Republican. 58% of Fox viewers initially Democrats changed parties, and then a mere 150 seconds a week of Fox can can increase Republican vote share. So yeah, I mean it really. And then there was other studies that are newer that have come out, but I knew
So,
this.
so I agree that like this media is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
But people have to be open to it, you know, like what made, so like you take the historical example of like 1930s Germany, and not that I'm comparing right-wing America since the 80s to Nazi Germany,
Maybe
but that's the classic example in which historians and other social scientists have looked at like what made so many millions of people prone to buying into this, this ideology that across most of history people might not have been prone to buy into. And so they look at these other factors in addition to the very powerful propaganda machine, Nazi propaganda machine. But the Nazi propaganda machine knew exactly which buttons to push, and these buttons that they pushed, it worked because people were open to certain messaging in a particular context. And I think that's true of a lot of, especially white middle class, white working class men since the 1980s, and women, frankly. And I'm just curious if, like, you think about your dad in that context,
Yeah,
or
I'm always arguing with people on Twitter about this. I mean, not arguing, but like people who say, well, they had to feel that way to begin with. And I say, yeah, some maybe had an inkling of that, but not necessarily. Like I saw my dad change 180 degrees. That's not who he was. I grew up like, treat black people equally. We really screwed them over, and so be cognizant of that. Um, um, uh, Love thy neighbor as thyself, blah, blah, blah. We help poor people, all of that completely changed. And I think that many people are not necessarily deep thinkers. They're maybe, how many people can really afford the time to think deeply about things, and all those ideas are out there, they're floating around. Racism is out there, so it's like, yeah, there's like little seedlings, in everybody. And so what right-wing media does is they water those. So I think generally, like, there's a naivete among the population, and also media literacy, understanding media is not taught. And it has been a goal of the right to dumb down education. They don't even believe in public education, right? You look at the Koch Fred Koch manifesto. I call it a manifesto. It was when he was running for vice president in 1980, and he's got a whole list of there shouldn't be Social Security, there shouldn't be Medicare, there shouldn't be public schools, there shouldn't be public libraries, going to school shouldn't be mandatory. Okay, so I don't even believe in school. So over the years, I think there's also been a dumbing down, and I think that's been purposeful. Um, so those are my thoughts.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't disagree with your thoughts, but I'm always trying to like probe deeper to come to a sort of clear understanding of this. So like there were lots of people who felt this way throughout American history, but even through the middle of the 20th century at the height of sort of Democratic Party power and the New Deal. And this was like, say, in the 1950s and 60s when union density was at its peak in American history. There would have been a lot of, I think, frankly, white working class men who were prone to reactionary ideas, but they didn't go full bore. So you might say, well, there wasn't a media architecture,
Mhm.
and that's true. But I also think that they had
Yeah.
other sort of social bonds that kept them sort of attached to a better way of thinking about the world, or a better way of a better form of political behavior. And when that starts to break down, I think more and more people are then open to
Yeah.
the demagoguery.
Yeah. But yeah, I do. I think you're right. Like, I think that the perfect audience was the white aging male, because like all of this stuff is changing. They're the patriarchs. They're the politicians. They're the lawyers. They're the doctors. They're the leaders. And then suddenly, there's women's rights. There's civil rights. Um, they're kind of like losing their place in society. It doesn't, they're no longer maybe the sole breadwinner. And, they've got um, people telling them, I think Jason probably agrees with this, saying, you have to change, you have to allow for other people to come into the fold, and you have to share your whatever you have to share.
Mm-hmm.
You can no longer have it all, and then you got somebody like Rush Limbaugh coming along saying, no, fuck that, no, you don't have to do that, don't listen to them, they're wrong, and I'll tell you why they're wrong. So yeah, like they're vulnerable. Just think like their whole who they are is being questioned. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever had an identity crisis. I did when I was like 27. I was like, who the frack am I? And it's horrible. You have to like rebuild yourself, and you have to have courage to do that. And then you have somebody who's really persuasive telling you you don't have to do that. So yeah, you're yeah, I agree with you.
I
Yeah.
think I can't remember which of the people you interviewed for your film said this, but somebody said, okay, so trickle down economics, obviously, the money did not flow downwards in society. In fact, the exact opposite, and it was never designed to. But somebody said hate trickled down. So like, and I sort of like that, and I sort of agree with that. So somebody said, there was always hateful attitudes by the country club types
Right.
towards the hoi polloi, towards the plebes, towards the working class.
Yeah.
Um, and this is classic Rush Limbaugh. He's of this country club mindset, but he packaged it in a way that more and more people who weren't from the country club could buy into this ideology.
Yeah. And one of the tactics um, is Okay, I'm gonna go off topic just a little bit. I'm gonna go back. In the 1930s, there was, I don't know if you know about this, but I just found out about this. Really exciting. The first political consultants, Clem Whitaker and I think it's Leon Baxter, they created Campaigns Inc. And they were the first political strategists, and they developed these strategies and tactics, um, to defeat popular bills like, say, universal health care or whatever. And one of the tactics was pretend to be one of the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in a democracy, at least since Andrew Jackson, that's been the strategy, to sell your elitist ideology as something that is best for everybody. Sometimes
Yeah.
it works and sometimes it doesn't. Yeah.
And you have pictures of Rush Limbaugh with cigars on golf courses, and he says to them, "I'm one of you," and he says it so persuasively, or said, they believe him.
He could be very convincing.
Yeah. Yeah. He convinced my dad for sure.
Yeah.
And then he got unconvinced, which was great.
Which is remarkable. Yeah. So I don't know if so your film came out in 2015.
16, really.
2016. Okay.
IMDb got it. Yeah.
So I don't know if you've persisted in being a scholar of Fox News and right-wing media, but have you followed the career path of Tucker Carlson? And I think it's particularly apropos given that the New York Times just came out this past weekend with a 20,000 word research-based article on Tucker Carlson and his rise.
It's so funny, Matthew Modine, the actor's, he was like a producer in the film and a narrator. And I found that article because he retweeted to the New York Times, instead of doing all that, or you could have just watched the Brainwashing of My Dad.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's why I came out with I did keep up with it, and that's why I came out with a book in also called The Brainwashing of My Dad in October, kind of an updated version. But I wasn't talking so much. I didn't talk so much about Tucker Carlson. Really, I was kind of like going back further in history, going, oh.
Why didn't you talk about Tucker Carlson? There's never enough anti-Tucker Carlson talk.
But you're right. When I started the book, he wasn't really big. He didn't have the audience and the stature that he has now. So, and then also it's kind of hard.
I'm not mad that there wasn't a lot of Tucker Carlson, because
I'm glad to hear that, Jason.
I've had an ass full of Tucker Carlson in the stuff that I do and the video essays that I make. I have to watch a lot of, like, my YouTube search history is a nightmare, and the amount of Tucker Carlson that I have watched juxtaposed to the amount of William F. Buckley Jr. that I have watched, with the amount of who's the postmodernist, the bald guy? Can't think of his name right now.
Michel Foucault.
Yes. Yes. Too much. Too much.
I'd rather watch Michel Foucault than Tucker Carlson. But William F. Buckley could be sort of entertaining at times, I think.
Maybe I just find those episodes. I found the one with him and Kissinger. That was it was hard to watch.
Yeah. So have you watched any of his his Crossfire episodes with like Noam Chomsky or Gore Vidal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made a short clip. There's a short clip out there for a show we did on postmodernism, a short intro. Maybe it was like a 7-8 minute intro where I took the Foucault and Chomsky debate, that I thought was kind of interesting.
I love that debate because, my grad students, I forced them to read Foucault, and they're usually confused and mystified. But that debate really clarifies things. Here's what's
Can you guys send me a link to that so I can?
Yeah.
It's on YouTube. It's a pretty famous debate from I think 1971.
It is from 71.
And it takes place in, I want to say, Amsterdam.
It's somewhere overseas. I remember that.
Yeah, so it's pretty classic, and it's just two guys who are extremely smart and sort of well grounded in their own worldview, speaking past one another. But in the process,
yeah.
process, you learn about what they think and how they ground their understanding of the world.
Well, it sounds like you guys have a greater propensity for self-torture than I do.
There's another gentleman. So we had to do, or I did on this channel. There was a 6-hour stream we did Sunday for our good friends media company. Doug Lane has a new media company, Sublation Media, and they were launching a magazine. And one of the guests on that show is a man named Matt McManus, and Matt, who's a professor in Toronto, reads all the right-wing books and then writes critiques of them.
Oh God, I'd be so.
I mean, yeah, in essence, that is what I did when I researched and wrote my book on the culture wars. And recently, because I'm writing this new book that's almost done on the history of how Americans have thought about and conceptualized Karl Marx. And so speaking of torture, I read Mark Levin's book,
he
American Marxism.
Oh, God. So before we go, I need you to briefly tell me what you thought of Mark Levin's American Marxism.
Oh, God. It's brutal. So he's a horrible writer. Just straight up horrible writer.
Is there like no footnotes whatsoever?
Well, there's footnotes, but here's what he does. He introduces like an idea with a bombastic, over the top, as if he's on the radio, declaration about how this particular idea or this particular person, say critical race theory with its foundations in Marx, is destroying the nation. And then he includes an extremely lengthy sort of passage or quote from another book. And then he'll follow that up with an extremely lengthy quote or passage from one of his previous books. And then he'll tie it together and just say, "See, I told you so." It's really bad. But it's like a repackaged form of the Red Scare McCarthyism without really any communists around to be afraid of. So it's pretty bizarre. Anything he dislikes, from the Green New Deal to critical race theory to Bernie Sanders to Joe Biden, even, is Marx or Marxism. It's bad.
Yeah, it's bad. Well, bless you for doing that, so we don't have to.
One question.
Well, before there was a question on here. I was trying to find it. Sorry, I had to step away for a minute. What were you going to say, Andrew?
Well, I was curious what either Jen or you, Jason, think about. I mean, so it's kind of like it's a cultural event when the New York Times dedicates 20,000 words to one person, Tucker Carlson. Mm-hmm. The only other person they've done that with in the past 10 years is Trump, right? So it's a major sort of cultural event. They obviously are ascribing significant influence to him. I don't know about this. So let's say like he maxes out at 3 million viewers. Mm-hmm. I guess is kind of a lot in today's cable news landscape. I don't know. And then a lot of his clips will go viral, perhaps on other platforms. But that's not really that many people. Like Father Coughlin, the Catholic priest radio host in the 1930s, had a radio audience of 30 or 40 million people. And that was at a time when the country had about 110, 120 million people. So there's influence and then there's influence. I feel like the New York Times is, as part of its certification process is like, see, this is this really important demagogue. Look at him. And I don't know if he's as important as all that, but I'm curious what you all think.
I'll say this. Tom Hartman, a while back, had made a statement about Fox News that I thought was really interesting. And he's a little older. I wouldn't be surprised if he's in his early 60s, I believe.
And he's in Jen's movie.
He is in Jen's movie. And Jen, you got to hook up that
Yeah.
Tom Hartman introduction. I want to get Tom on the show. But Tom Hartman made a statement a while back where he...
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I could introduce you if you like.
Yes, I'm being serious.
Yeah.
Tom Hartman made a point a while back where he said his wife and him watched Fox News because there was no reality shows on there. And he's like, I hate what they say, but sometimes I just want to hear the news. I don't want to watch a prison show. And I thought that was interesting. At the time, CNN or MSNBC, one of them was running, every time you change channels, there was like a prison show.
Yeah.
And so for him to say that, I thought was kind of interesting. I think Fox News has their listener base locked in, and it's a listener base that has some money. They definitely have donor dollars. These are the people that like donate to political campaigns. So when people say things like, well, Joe Rogan has more listeners or something like that, it's like, okay, but what do those people do with their funds? Are these voters? Are these people that just buy Monster Energy drinks and Affliction shirts? Because that's who the people that they're advertising to. So sure, every so often Joe Rogan has a somewhat right-leaning figure on his show that he doesn't push back on, and people get kind of mad about that. But more often than not, he has his celebrity friends on that show, and they kind of talk about nothing. And you have to ask yourself, like, what is he selling? And I think the people that are selling politics to people that are involved in politics in some capacity. Fox News, if it wasn't for Fox News, I feel this way, you don't really have the Tea Party. I understand the Coke involvement with it. I understand astroturfing, but the amount of propaganda that happened during the Obama administration with Fox, really, you can go back to 9/11. And for me, that's the time when we see the big radicalization of the right.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see the left radicalization in 2016. I really don't necessarily, I know a lot of people like to count Occupy, but that was a movement where people still didn't know what it was. It was very ambiguous. By the time Bernie Sanders starts to run for office, he's got a very clear message that's resonating to people that are extremely downwardly mobile with not a lot of options. And they had been ignored for the last 8 years. And so you really see this acceptance of terms like socialism, this acceptance of the left, but the Fox News, and I was saying this to you, Jen, I think on the phone when we talked the other day, and I've never had a chance to have this conversation with you, Andrew, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about this. If you think of a lot of the boomers that got into Fox News, the way an older generation got their political messaging was from a radical voice, right? You got Abby Hoffman, you got the Black Panthers, you got Angela Davis. You have these radical voices yelling at you about the truth.
Amen, brother.
and if you think about conservatives of that era, they were William Buckley types. They were reserved. They were quiet. They had the mid-Atlantic accent still, right? So that's what conservatives sounded like. They sounded like your parents. These guys yelling about the super predator generation and poor people and welfare queens and all this other shit, they're yelling at it not like politicians. They're yelling like the figures that you heard in the 60s.
See, man, there were always conservatives screaming in ways similar to the way the conservatives scream now. It's just that they might not have had the platform. They actually had large platforms, though. It's pretty interesting if you look at like the history of the right wing. A lot of it was through religious conservatism. A lot of it was through organizations like the John Birch Society, which is featured in Jen's film. But really, there hasn't been a time in American history where there haven't been really loud, really obnoxious reactionary voices.
But were they to the level that we see them at, where you're digesting them the same way you are in 2001? It takes Barry Goldwater how many years before he gets his prize in the Reagan administration? Almost 20?
Yeah.
You know, I had to watch. I found on what's his name? LBJ's has a library online of all his commercials, and in some of those you get some of the Goldwater ads and the Goldwater snippets about how against the idea of Medicare and Social Security he was, which was antithetical to a generation that had got their largesse through the government. So, but even he wasn't yelling it like you hear with the voices of the 2000s and the 80s and the 90s.
I think you make a good point. You make a good point that those voices have gone mainstream. They've taken over the Republican Party. You're right. That's the difference. Yeah.
Oh yeah. They've definitely taken over the Republican Party. And when you think about the adversarial voice on the left, sorry, I'm having some sort of delay problem. I can see myself hella late. When you think about the adversarial voices on the left, they sound the same. They're equally as animated, equally as full of vitriol. So it's almost hard for one to decipher what to listen to, because you can't even say this guy is a nut, because there's definitely nuts on my side of the aisle as well, and sometimes I can feel like a bit of a nut when I'm passionate about something. So you know, it's interesting to see where we are now with this whole abortion issue, because again, I lived in a conservative white Christian household, and I would say that the mom was probably more progressive than one would think a Christian conservative woman would be when it came to women's issues, and especially a woman's right to have autonomy over her body. So I find the whole culture war aspect to a lot of that stuff very, very interesting, especially because of the yelling. Because there's so much yelling, it ends up becoming moralism on both sides, and no one's talking about, again, like certain material things. Like, well, this should be a healthcare conversation. You know, we did a whole show about talking about the Roe legal case. And I think most people that yell about it don't even understand how it works legally, what the 14th Amendment says, the war against the 14th Amendment. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm a Marxist. You're preaching to the choir. But I will also say that one of the things that research and writing about the culture wars made me realize is that a lot of these issues people consider life and death, like existential.
Yeah.
And so even though I'm like, how are we going to redistribute the wealth? When they're debating issues like, abortion seems like clear cut why that would matter to people. But even if they're debating issues like that we might consider more symbolic, it takes on meaning for people. It's like Jen earlier was talking about an identity crisis she had in her life. And I think it seems like her father had one, even if he wouldn't have called it that, perhaps. But when people's identities are at stake, it takes on it takes on meaning for people in ways that I don't think we should sort of diminish. My whole thing is how do I convince people that they're going to feel a lot more solid in their sort of existence and their identity if they have their material worlds are less precarious.
And that becomes like as I'm watching Jen's documentary and I'm hearing the family members, complain. It definitely reminded me of several conversations in different places I've been. Jen doesn't know this. I'm a touring musician, and I spent the majority of the 2000s traveling all over the place. I play heavy music, and I'm always in a place where no black man has any business being, right? And I'm also very comfortable talking about my political views and religion. I just don't care. And I think I'm pretty good at doing it without being an asshole, right? And when you are related to someone, especially if you're the child, you're always wrong, right? And then no matter how wrong the person is at the dinner table, it's like you're not going to win this argument because I remember when you peed on the floor when you were 4, so you're the 4-year-old floor peer for the rest of your life. Don't tell me shit, kid. I'm not related to you in these situations, so we can have a very nice exchange of ideas, and I will listen to you. And I've heard every conservative argument you can give, but I've also been homeless. I've worked with the unhoused, lived amongst them for a very long time. So there's certain things that I understand from a real lived perspective that you can't just be flippant about. And it's not even an agree to disagree kind of walk away. It's like, no. This is, don't you hate this? Well, yeah. Wouldn't it be better if that makes sense? It's kind of like at the end of the thing when your mom switched the switch the messaging out. It's slowly, how do you switch the messaging out without pounding on the table about how wrong someone is? And it's hard because we're passionate about these things. We love these people that we see going down these rabbit holes, and we get angry. Just find yourself a black friend from Oakland at the dinner table, and everything's better. Just kidding. Don't do that. These are jokes.
Jen, have you had reception from conservatives who have watched your film? Have you gotten feedback from any conservatives?
Not very many have watched the film, but I get it tagged on the on my brainwashing Facebook page because I still post stuff about right-wing media and the vast right-wing conspiracy. I'm still trying to save the world. And so I get pushback either on oh, wait a minute, a couple times I did get people emailing me. You know where I get the most comments is on YouTube, like underneath the trailer. like this is so full of shit, and you're full of shit, and you're stupid, and you suck, that kind of thing. It's rarely a very cogent argument. But
Welcome to our world,
That,
Jen.
yeah, I was going to say that's really strange when you're getting comments in the YouTube comment section that lack cogency. Coherence.
yeah, isn't it?
No, I did a whole take on how I now view the YouTube comments, and it has made my life better. I feel lighter. Teeth are whiter. Like everything's better. Well, if I could, I'd like to take you guys into the champagne room for a little bit, where we can have a deeper dive into why Metallica only has 4 good records.
The first 4?
The first 4.
Yeah, of course.
And we'll have more deep dive talks about culture war nonsense, the right wing. Andrew's going to give us the history of deregulation, starting with the 1979 credit card.
I want to hear about that.
He's not going to do. I'm totally joking. And if he could do that, I would walk to Illinois and be like, "Holy shit!" But thank you guys. Thank you guys for watching. If you are a patron, the link should already be up. If you're not a patron, it is patreon.com/Bitter Lake Presents. You can get part of this conversation. M. Toussaint, are we taking calls tonight? Send me a message and let me know if you're ready. I would love to take calls if we can. Is the Black Album the 4th Metallica album? No, it is the 5th.
And Justice for All.
And Justice for All is the 4th.
Yeah.
It's the 5th. If you guys can find it, I wrote 3,500 words on Metallica after the Black Album and why they had to be that band after I conducted several interviews with people in that scene.
Yes.
I'm intrigued.
Sorry to say that.
Oh, we can get into it. So thank you guys so much, and we are out.
He has to go to the bathroom.